Thank you for your patience as we get started here. Who knew it was going to be a snow day in April? It's a day. Here we are. Thank you for making time. I wanted to start off by introducing the team that is before you, and then we'll just take a moment to kind of center ourselves before we dive in. So for those of you that may not know, let me pause first. This meeting will be recorded. We are also in webinar mode, so that means you won't be recorded in that sense, but the recording will be posted on the volunteer portal of IFCLA's website after the fact. So I just wanted to name that here. So if we get into Q&A or things like that and you're concerned or preferring to protect your identity feature, and neither of those are recorded in the video recording. So that being said, my name is Sarah John. I'm the Executive Director of IFCLA, the St. Louis Interfaith Committee on Latin America. And I want to go ahead and invite Rita and Ali to introduce themselves, and then I'll share just a little bit about IFCLA before we dive in.
Good evening. My name is Rita Chang. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator over at IFCLA and the ISPN Program Manager. ISPN is the Immigrant Service Providers Network.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ali Suleiman. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am the Accompaniment Coordinator for IFCLA.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen here for just a second to get us going. Can someone help me monitor chat? Rita or Ali, could you help me monitor chat? And I just want to give a thumbs up to make sure we're sharing the right screen and you can see the slides. Awesome. So just to be clear, you are here tonight for the volunteer training for the newly rapid response style accompaniment project at IFCLA for COVID-19 vaccinations. Oops, so I want to tell you just a little bit about our organization. For those of you that may not know, IFCLA was founded in 1982 and has continued in sort of the area of work, certainly transforming and modifying our programs over time. But our current mission is sort of highlights on these three buckets or core principles, which are education, organizing, and accompaniment. And so tonight we're going to talk a lot about accompaniment, and we're going to talk about sort of the way we design and develop this program that you'll see is pretty focused on Latin America, or in that sense, and in this particular iteration of the program, on supporting specifically with Spanish-speaking communities. So that's not to say that we don't hope or aren't willing to sort of lend any of these tools to any other communities. That's just situated in our relationships and where our work has been focused to date. So you'll see that we'll speak primarily when we're talking about language access or dual language. Our default is to talk about English and Spanish, but I just want to own that, that this is something that we hope could be expanded as needed to include additional communities. So we have, many of you I think that are here tonight are existing IFCLA accompaniment volunteers. And so as we get started, Ali will give a line or two about what that accompaniment program has meant. And historically, in the last 5 years, the program has been focused on accompanying folks to immigration enforcement check-ins, right? And so we are modifying a lot of that model and the way we do things to meet these present needs. So before we dive in, I just want to take a moment to ground us. And so I know that certainly we all bring a lot to the table. A lot of it is really strong, and some of it, if you're like me, has been a bit chaotic today. So I just want to ask you to take a couple of deep breaths. If you need to silence your phone, please do that. Kind of try to limit distractions as best as you can around you. And Rita, I would just like to invite you, if you wouldn't mind, please reading this quote here. And if you could just take a deep breath and let the words sink in for a few minutes.
Solidarity does not assume that our struggles are the same struggles, or that our pain is the same pain, or that our hope is for the same future. Solidarity involves commitment and work, as well as the recognition that even if we do not have the same feelings or the same lives, or the same bodies, we do live on common ground. Sarah Ahmed.
So I just want to think with you, and I would invite you, if you have a moment, to pop something in the chat that maybe shares your reaction, a thought, a feeling, an emotion about that. And I know certainly some of my, oh, let's see, do we need to enable the chat feature so that participants can chat with each other? Got it. I think that is open. Great. Thank you. Great. I know for me, something that resonates here is that we might live on ground that we believe to be common or that at one point was and no longer is. And many of us live on stolen ground. And so I just want to hold space for that too. Empathy. Thank you. Thank you for bringing empathy to the table. Wow, a lot of empathy. Just going to give one more minute here to help us get situated in why we're doing this. If you have anything else that you'd like to pop into the chat, please go ahead and do so. And I just want to briefly review the agenda. So we are going to move through the purpose kind of, and we'll sort of ground this. Thank you, diversity, encouraging or encouragement. We're going to move into a focus on the purpose of tonight and the purpose of the program. So we'll talk about what accompaniment means and give you some language and some context for that at IFCLA. Then we'll move into like what are community needs and where did this ambitious idea come from and what are we trying to do. And then we'll get into some of the specifics about how this will work, how we think it's going to work. We'll learn together. We'll lean on to your expertise as well. And then we will have space to talk about questions after we kind of move through some of the logistical conversations. And then we'll do next steps and conclude. Latest, I would say, is 8:30, so hopefully we can wrap up a little before that. But if you are feeling chatty tonight, we can stay for questions as long as we might need. So the purpose for tonight, and like the purpose for tonight is to prepare you for the accompaniment program that is focused on COVID-19 vaccinations. And so the training tonight is working with you as IFCLA volunteers to ground you in the role of accompaniment with immigrants who are going through or trying to go through the COVID-19 vaccination process in the greater St. Louis area. So that's different than you're here tonight to learn how to get shots in everyone's arms, right? We know at the end of the day, we believe at the end of the day that vaccination is an important step for public health and protecting ourselves and each other, even given the myriad of uncertainties and changing nature of vaccination effectiveness. And science changes over time, right? We've learned that. But I think we've all seen that this is something that's really important to do quickly for all of our health. We've also seen that not everyone has equal access to information, to resources, and to actually getting the poke in the arm, right? And so what we're trying to do tonight is accompany folks, is equipping you to accompany folks through that process, right? And so that's a little different than doing the process for them, than making decisions for someone else, than taking information, filling out details, and then giving it back, right? And I will let Allie go into that, but the purpose, I just want to name again that this is about accompaniment and not about running a clinic, running all of those things, right? There are lots of ways and lots of tools and strategies being used across the region to increase access to the vaccine, right? And so we are continuing to work with partners across the country, across the region, who are doing this in a variety of different ways. And many of you come from congregations and organizations that are pursuing vaccination access. And so I think those are all not competing strategies, right? And if we do it well, then this is a place to meet a stopgap sort of immediate need of folks who aren't maybe supported by some of the other tactics being used in our community. I also just want to name that I think we feel pretty strongly that any volunteers that participate in any in-person accompaniment would be vaccinated and immune, or at least through the wait period, right, post-vaccination, immune asterisks maybe, before you participate in person. I don't really feel like as director that that's something I want to mandate or something that I feel comfortable like demanding that you do that, but I would strongly recommend that everyone, for your own safety and for the safety of the folks who we are accompanying, that those who participate in person are vaccinated. But we'll have time to talk about that later. So, Allie?
Yeah, so as Sarah mentioned, this process is accompaniment. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what accompaniment is and what are the roles and expectations of those who are doing the accompanying. So accompaniment at its core is the ministry of presence. So this allows us to acknowledge our mutual struggle for justice by walking alongside immigrants in this journey and throughout these vaccination events and spaces. And as an accompanier, there are several roles that you are going to play, depending on which role you are. First and foremost, we want to provide a comforting, non-anxious presence. Many of these vaccination centers are hard to navigate, especially when there's a police or National Guard presence. And by remaining calm, we hopefully decrease the level of anxiety around going to these events for those people who want to go. We also want to bear public witness to the actions of authority figures in those spaces and show our public support for immigrants. Lastly, we want to ensure language access where those who are being accompanied will have immediate understanding of the interaction and what took place. Let's go ahead and go through some of the expectations with those roles also. We expect that you as an accompanier will center the needs and focus on the person that you are going with. We also expect you to maintain the confidentiality as well. Before this clinic, I believe you read through our confidentiality agreement and signed that. This highlights a lot of those confidentiality questions. And if you want, we can pop that into the chat or put that on the volunteer portal for later access. And above all, we want you to use good judgment and common sense. I'm sure some of you will have a lot of different unexpected situations arise because all of these spaces are different. All of the vaccination centers are different, and we're not entirely sure what to expect in every single circumstance. So we want you to trust your instincts and also use the resources available that are presented tonight to navigate those situations.
I just want to lift up something that you said, Allie, that I think is really critical. Those of you who have gone through other accompaniment trainings with us know this, that we could spend the next 12 hours discussing what if and imagining scenarios that we might encounter in accompaniment here or in other accompaniment spaces. And that's not the point, right? That's not a good use of anyone's time. The point is to remain centered on what is the purpose, what are we trying to accomplish in the short and sort of the longer term with this work, and then use that to navigate the spaces that we're going to do our best to plan and prepare for, and then we have to be resilient and humble enough to make changes on the fly. So thanks for lifting that up, Allie.
I think we can go to the next slide. Great, so let's go a little bit into language. Who are compas? So when we use the word compa, we're referring to the individuals that we are honored to accompany. This word is derived from the Spanish word of compañera, compañera, y compañerequis, meaning friend. So when we use this language, we acknowledge our mutual struggle for justice. And this goes back to a little bit of the slide and the groundings that Sarah presented in the beginning.
And so to talk a little bit about the community needs that we are experiencing, that we are witnessing. So IFCLA is the fiscal sponsor of ISPN, the Immigrant Service Providers Network. Very briefly, the ISPN is a coalition of service providers who come together under the premise that Not only is individual service provision strengthened, but there's this inherent value add when providers are in relationship with one another and collaborating. And through ISPN as of late, we've been convening providers to understand and discuss current challenges with equitable vaccine distribution. And this is usually the space where we collectively find the limitations of the publicly available resources and information. You know, the support that's supposed to be accessible to everyone during this time, but continues to be out of reach for immigrant community members. And so we're just gonna talk about 3 things on this slide. First and foremost, everyone needs free access to the COVID-19 vaccine. So we know government and insurance companies are footing the bill for the vaccine, though A, not everyone may know that, and B, there are additional costs to access, cost of transportation, cost of getting a photo ID if you need that, cost of the time that it takes for you to take off work when the events are being held during work hours. All of these costs add up. And secondly, everyone needs access to the vaccine without fear of persecution from law enforcement agencies and or employers. At some of the locations that are offering the vaccine, law enforcement officers, including municipal police, Navy, military officers are present, and they may be directing traffic or navigation at these sites. The presence of folks in uniform does not mean protection for all people, and especially for Black and brown folks, their presence alone may add undue stress and trauma. Of the individuals that we've spoken to who are running the FEMA event downtown at the Dome, we've been told that no one will be asking about immigration status. But lastly, current vaccination opportunities require competency or fluency in written and verbal English. So think about registration, making your actual appointment, and then when you actually get to the site, how do you navigate that site when there's limited language access, interpretation there. So even reflecting on publicly available public health information out there, the folks who typically access that first are those who are English speakers, because to the folks who are releasing that information, most of the time the translations, the accessibility needs come as an afterthought. And so one example of that is prior to this training being scheduled, the state was offering their vaccine navigator only in English, but we have news as of this morning, they've translated it into Spanish, thanks to the advocacy of providers within our network, as well as advocates outside of our network. So folks are able to register online for an appointment, though I would say the state is missing some translations for some communications reminders and other emails. But just taking into, we can go to the next slide. So just taking into consideration all of those community needs that we just talked about. This brings us to why we're here tonight. We talked a little bit about the purpose, about IFCLA's posture toward accompaniment. There have been individual accompaniment efforts within our community, and some of you on this call might have undertaken some of these yourselves. But this initiative is to try to centralize some of that and then put you all in community with one another. We intend to use this initiative as a vehicle to accompany compas as we continue to push for more equitable access for the vaccine. And to be clear, like Sarah said, this is not about pushing people to get vaccinated. We are trying to reach individuals who would like to get the vaccine and accompany them through this process. It's understanding that public health is a community level issue, that healthcare is a human right, and through IFCLA's accompaniment, we continue to build community in meeting these needs. And so while we're working toward this systemic change, we're also witnessing real needs now and trying to address them. And so, all that to say, we want to ensure that people have access to make informed decisions about their health and well-being for themselves and their family. If they want to get the vaccine, point blank, they should be able to do that. And secondly, that entails completing the necessary registration forms, traveling to and from appointments safely, as well as navigating on the day of getting the vaccine. What does that process look like? doing that seamlessly. And then finally, knowing that this was an entire process, and also that this is not a one and done kind of transactional thing, that building relationships is about remaining connected to neighbors in the community. And so this is where you all come in, and I will pass it on to my colleagues.
Zoom fail. Sorry, y'all. I wanted to start with a quick overview of like how this will work. So where we are right now is on the left side here is volunteer training. Obviously we need to build the capacity before we sort of tell folks that we're available to do this. So that's where we are right now. After tonight, we will put into the chat at the end this evening and then follow up with an email. You'll have a link to sort of actually sign up if you want to volunteer. So there's no obligation or commitment for you to be here now. So the idea is that you get all the information and you also get to make the best choices for you and your family. And so in the online form, we'll ask a few more questions, get a little bit more information so that we can contact you. Then we'll organize that data, sort it. And while we're doing that, tomorrow we will launch this project with sort of two groups or sort of a cluster of communities that we're already in touch with through Accompaniment. And so we will notify folks and sort of invite that if they would like Accompaniment, it would be available in these ways. Then we will, you know, connect the dots, right? And so IFCLA staff, the three of us in the short term, and then I know a couple of our awesome team is on the call too. We will work to sort of match the data similarly to those who maybe participated in IFER funds or to ICE accompaniment previously. We sort of match the data, create teams, notify and equip folks with the information, who they should contact, who they should reach. Then there's sort of the three phases that we could think of as like three buckets, or we could just condense because they might all happen sort of in various paths, right? But I think in a lot of places there's an online registration component or two. Then there's a coordination component of figuring out who and where and when and what time. And then there's vaccination and what happens day of and how all of those pieces come together. And then what I should have also included here is that the final step is reporting. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but it's very important so that we can ensure that we, A, sort of complete full circle, right? No one gets lost or left behind or abandoned in this effort. And B, so that we then can have an opportunity to reach back to Compas and say, you know, invite a space for feedback. And at the end of the day, while we are accountable to you as volunteers in a lot of ways, we're also accountable to Compas. And I would say first and foremost, to be accountable to directly impacted community means we need to ask and we need to build that relationship. So that's part of the role of reporting. So this is the broad overview. Now we're going to get into the nitty gritty.
So as a volunteer, there are three different roles that you can play. You can be an online navigator, an on-site navigator, and or provide transportation. I think. Okay, so let's go through a little bit more of the roles and the responsibilities that go along with each of these different volunteer opportunities. So the first is the online navigator. So this volunteer is going to help the compa in filling out the online registration form required for the specific vaccination event that they are wanting to attend, and along with that, scheduling. So this could be as simple as answering questions about the form, or it could be calling a compa, reading the questions to them, and then recording their answers on the online form and sending that information in. The role of the online navigator will be completely virtual. So this will be a good option for those of you who still want to participate, but are not quite comfortable with doing that in person yet. One other role of the online navigator will be to prep for the appointment. So this is going to be helping them gather what ID needs to be present and what are the things that they need to bring to the appointment, depending on vaccination site. The on-the-site navigator. So this volunteer is going to be responsible with helping an in-person day of support. So you will either communicate with the compa via WhatsApp to set a time and location to meet the day of the appointment. And in this spaces, you and potentially another volunteer will go through the appointment with the compa together, from check-in to receiving the vaccine to leaving the event. Yes, the online navigator is going to need to be somebody who is bilingual, because they will be making direct communication with the compa. Somebody who is an on-site navigator, ideally we would like to do pairs of folks if we have enough volunteers. So potentially you won't have to be bilingual for that role. Yeah, just depending on what sort of request we get. The third volunteer role is transportation. So this volunteer will also help with in-person day of support. If you are monolingual, you will either coordinate with the on-site navigator or IFCLA staff to coordinate a pickup time and location that works for both you and the compa. You will drive to the vaccination site, drop off the compa, and either wait there or schedule a time to pick them up after the vaccination. Yeah, and at the very end of each of these roles and expectations, you see the importance of reporting back. So Sarah touched base on a little bit on this, and we're going to go into more depth in a later slide as well.
So just to sort of recap, because I like to bookend things, basically what the logistics are. So some of the logistics between matching the team, so like an online navigator and a transportation, or a bilingual and a transport person would be sort of paired together, like Ali said, and then matched with an individual. And so there are a couple ways that we'll do that. We are working on sort of regions or zip codes, right? So we'll be trying to determine where folks live or work as they report, and determine where they might want to get the vaccine. So where's point A, where's point B, and then match volunteers who when you register after tonight, you'll be able to say, I'll drive anywhere, or keep me only in St. Louis City, or I'm out in the county, so I'd rather stay in the county, or hey, I'm all the way out in St. Charles, and if I can be supportive from St. Charles to St. Louis City, that would be ideal. But, you know, I think we'll try to, similar to how we've done with the IFER Fund, for those of you that were available during that, kind of match and group by that way. I do want to also emphasize that, similar to other accompaniment programs we've done, the majority of our communication will be through WhatsApp. So there'll be a link, and actually I think there's a link in the follow-up email from tonight, but if you do not have WhatsApp on your phone, you'll need it on your mobile device. So there's a link for that. It's a secure texting. Application, and information will be shared between staff and you, and then you and the team, and potentially you and the compa. So then I think after sort of we connect the dots, then a lot of the work is sort of up to you and you reaching out and making contact. And so we have some tools that we'll share with you about what those conversations might look like. Susan, great question about can on-site navigators work with compas in small groups. So a lot of this is going to be, let's see what the capacity is and what the need is, right? So if we are blown away like we have been in the past with hundreds of people who say, yes, I want this, then you'll probably hear from us pretty soon, and we'll say, hey, we're going to make groups or teams for on-site navigation, and like maybe we would at a particular site, and folks like going to get appointments or get shots at the same time, right? And kind of cluster and not do one-to-one. But I would maybe imagine that in the short term, we'll probably start one-to-one, and we'll be able to make it work like that. And then at the end, right, is reporting. And I will say we're going to go into that next, so I'll go ahead and jump into that. I see another quick question here I can address. This training tonight is mandatory in the sense that folks who aren't here will need to watch this recording before they can sign up for the training. So there will be information in a follow-up email about that, and we will make sure that connects the dots and all the circles get together. So you'll have the registration link tonight. Folks who weren't able to be here will get an email that's like a public email, general email that's like, missed the training, watch here, and then after they watch it, they'll get the link to register. Thanks, Marilyn, for pointing that out. Several places are limiting, as you might imagine, the number of people that can accompany in any vaccination sort of situation. So again, that will depend on lots of factors. So we're going to prepare so that folks aren't alone and isolated, but also know that that's the name of the game these days, right? Is being perhaps isolated and hopefully a little less alone. So I want to talk briefly about reporting. Those of you who've done this before are familiar or have seen it, right? We'll have an online form that's just a Google form. So I would say every volunteer who participates in accompaniment is going to fill out a report form. That could mean that if you're the driver, right, if you're the transport, you're going to only fill this out probably one time at the end of your driving job, and you get to fill it out and basically say, hey, here's what I did, here's who I worked with, here's how it went. That's another sort of, again, close the loop, make sure that we can say, yes, these folks who said they wanted accompaniment are actually being accompanied through the phases that they're asking. And that's also a space where you can say, hey, the compa was asking about this sort of thing and I didn't know what to say, right? Or the compa gave this feedback and they wanted me to share it with someone. That's a space where you can give that kind of reporting too. That's also a space where you can give key learnings, right? So if you think, if you are at a site and they're like, hey, this thing changed, or I don't know, maybe randomly, miraculously, you might say there's going to be tons of interpreters in lots of languages at all of the vaccination sites within the next 2 weeks, in which case will be totally not necessary. And that would be so awesome. And you could tell us that on the report back form. And so I think the point of this is not to be cumbersome. It should be short and sweet and just like ask for some bullet points. This would be something that, so if, for example, you're given a phone number, and you try calling the person 3 different times, maybe not 3 times in one day, maybe one time 3 days, right? And you can't get a hold of someone, you know, we're going to talk about, and we'll have some notes about like, hey, here's what could happen if you leave 3 voicemails, like, then maybe we'll take this route. But that would be like, okay, I don't need you to fill this form out every time you try to make a phone call. Or if the compa, you know, texts you back and says like, have a nice day, I don't need you to fill out a report back form that's like, the compa texted me and said this thing. So I don't need the minutia, but this is sort of like, think about it in phases or chunks of the work, and we'll ask you to report that. Okay, locations overview. I'm gonna invite Rita to step up for that one.
All righty, so you want to accompany, great. How and where? Well, to answer the how, it kind of depends on the where. And so baseline, where the appointment is depends on the needs of the compa. Compas will complete a form, like Sarah said, and they'll indicate needs with registration, transportation, and/or on-site navigation. So they will also list any other accommodations that they might have about making an appointment, whether they would prefer a site that's closer to their place of work, if they have mobility needs, etc. So considering all of those needs, we have compiled a list of locations on this slide. Notice that it is perhaps not exhaustive by any means. There are a couple different ways to approach this, and likely if you're on this call, you've been through this process yourself. And this is where we tell you that this is a co-learning space, and we want you to also think about the tips that you yourself used to search. You yourself have used to search. Yes. So we'll be talking about 3 places in particular on this slide. The first is the Dome event, which you've probably heard of, which is open to St. Louis City and County residents. The second is various locations in St. Louis County, where you can look on their STL Corona website. And then the third is the Vaccine Finder, which is where you can find local pharmacies and stores that are offering the vaccine.
I also just want to lift up that we have learned that St. Charles Health Department, St. Charles County Health Department is also hosting mass vaccinations at St. Charles Family Arena in St. Charles. So again, I would say that's maybe not one of our like big focus areas because we have less relationships out there. But if we have a need and a will to meet that need out there, then we'll do what we can. So that's great.
Thank you, Sarah. You can scoot on to the next slide. So just talking about the first bullet point, that is the Community Vaccination Center event, the FEMA event. So if the compa lives in St. Louis City or County, one option is this event at the old Rams Dome. Folks that we know in the service provider community have given us positive feedback about this event. We've been in communication with some folks at FEMA. So from now until June 1st, every day from 8 to 6, people can walk in and receive first and second dose of Pfizer. And so you just need a form of ID, doesn't have to be a photo ID, it could be a utility bill of some sort. Registration is necessary through the state's vaccine navigator, which looks like, Sarah, you wanna hit the button? Which looks like this, haha. And so basically to register with the state's vaccine navigator, there are 2 steps. One, you wanna scoot to the next slide, please. Step 1, you gotta register and get a patient ID. After you get your patient ID, they will send you an email and be like, here's your patient ID. Great. Then you'll go back to the state website and you'll be like, okay, well, I need an appointment. I have a patient ID now. And they will ask you for a patient ID. And then on the slide on the right, you see there are a bunch of different appointments that you can select. And then once you click it, it will prompt a date and a time, and you will be able to book it right on the state website. So 2-step process. So this event is a pretty fail-safe event if the compa is a St. Louis resident, as long as the hours work, remember 8 to 6 every day until June. And as long as the presence of law enforcement or military is not a deterrent, because there are folks who are at this event who are directing traffic, navigating folks across, but they are in uniform. And so we're just putting that out there because that is what we know.
I think it's also like important to recognize that that might be a trigger for a lot of people, even if it's not one for you. And so I think, again, in light of like providing access and orientation, right? So when you're talking to someone, you would just say, hey, don't be alarmed, or I want you to know that we've seen armed military guys and gals and people at these events. And so keep that on your radar, you know, and ask if there's a question or if there's things that need to talk about that. I think, you know, I think then just providing access to the information so that an individual can make the best decision themselves. Sorry, Rita.
No, thank you for lifting that up, Sarah. And we got a comment in the chat. Thank you, Trish. The Dome does accept walk-ins and they will register you on site. You will still have to go through the whole vaccine navigator thing with patient ID and then the naked, but yes, you can also do the walk-in thing. And like I mentioned earlier, this vaccine navigator is now, as of today, available in Spanish. The state is working on other languages to be determined. If we want to scoot on to the next slide. Thank you, Marcella, for lifting that up as well. The State Navigator website also has different locations that they update continuously. We just wanted to highlight the Dome event because we have had folks who have been through that process, as well as we know that this is going every day. So that website will continuously be updated, but you're just gonna have to check if you would like to select the different appointments. So number 2, St. Louis County. So the funny thing is that St. Louis County and the state and St. Louis City don't use the same thing necessarily, the same registration thing, but St. Louis County, here we go. So St. Louis County, you'll just go on their website, stlcorona.com, and they have a list of different sites where you can select an appointment. And you just gotta be a little bit careful because some of these appointments are not ongoing. Some of these appointments are just like kind of a one mass vaccination event or something. And Again, here, appointments are continuously added to this list. For example, we just got news that Congregation Share MF is partnering with St. Louis County to offer the Pfizer vaccine on April 25th, and then again on May 16th for the second dose. And so just to be clear, if you are trying to get a vaccine from, I guess, the Dome, you don't have to worry about the St. Louis County website. You don't have to worry about the next option I'm talking about. If you're trying to get a vaccine through the St. Louis County website, you don't have to worry about the Vaccine Navigator, the state website, and you don't have to worry about the last option. It just depends on whichever path you decide to go on to. And then the final path that we're going to talk about today, so we talked about some government options. There's a nifty website called vaccinefinder.org. What is Vaccine Finder? Have you heard of this? I have heard of this. And I will tell you that the Vaccine Finder is a crowdsourced website where you just type in your zip code and select whichever vaccine you have a preference for, and it will just populate all of the locations near you that host the vaccine that you requested. And so you should just take care, to click on the location just to confirm that this Walgreens, for example, does indeed carry the vaccine that you were looking for, and that it is in stock and that there are appointments. But this is a good option for people who feel more comfortable with going into your neighborhood Walgreens or Walmart compared to going down to the Rams Dome. I mean, I've lived in St. Louis my whole life, and I've never been to the Rams Dome. I never saw a Rams game. We had a football team once. Now we don't.
But it used to be called the TWA Dome, the TWA Dome. So were you around for that?
That was before my time, Sarah. Thank you for that history. But yes, this will help you find vaccines near pharmacies, Walmart, CVS, all those sorts of places. So all in all, we talked about a few locations. You want to scoot to the next slide, please? Things to keep in mind. Here's your bookend about all of that. Things to be aware of. The needs of the compas, any sort of accommodations or accessibility needs that they are voicing, those come first. And so I don't know if there's like any healthcare or like public health people in the room, but patient-centeredness, put the needs of the patient first. Are there any trusted locations where people would prefer to be at? When selecting a location, think about if that location has a specific residency requirement. When you're making an appointment, making sure that you know what to bring, if it has to be a photo ID, and any other sorts of things that folks should know prior to their appointment. And so all of this to say that depending on the location that you are registering someone for their vaccine, they may require different things, which is kind of tricky because we can't just give you a list and say, this is everything you will need when you go to get your vaccine. Because you know, you've talked to your friends and you've said, yeah, I've gotten the vaccine, I went to this place. And they're like, oh, what'd you have to bring? And then they give you a laundry list of things and then it doesn't match up to what you had to bring. So you got to figure it out at the appointment and make sure that you know that before you show up.
And we'll do our best to make sure that you do have as much access to information that we have. So we'll share some resources and links to places where, like some of you are sharing in chat of like this new place, and I know there's vaccines here, and I know there's vaccines there. So we'll make sure that you have access to actually probably a place on the ISPN website where they are updating and sharing vaccination sites as much as possible. And I think the idea here is we can probably equip you with the most information about the event at the Dome. But I think your role then is to equip compas with as much information as you have, right? They don't not everyone in our community has someone who's sitting here saying, here's where you could click on a website and like read all of this information and what does that even mean, right? And so that's part of your role, is not saying you need to go to the Dome and your appointment's on Saturday at 4 p.m. The role is, here's some things I know, right? Just like you might tell your aunt or your cousin or your neighbor down the street that it's time and here's how it's happened and that sort of stuff.
Patient-centeredness, needs of the compas first. And yes, we do actually have a comprehensive, we have a list of different vaccine sites on the ISPN website, which will be coming to you in a follow-up email. And I will pass it off to Sarah to close us out.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for now. I don't see open questions in the Q&A, but I know several of you had raised hands, and so I want to pause for that and make sure that we can answer those. So I want to address one thing that a couple folks asked while we were talking, and that's about sort of risk for undocumented folks encountering immigration enforcement. I think here's what I would say. Is there a risk? There is always a risk when you do not have the required status or paperwork in the United States, right? That's part of why we're working to change these things, because we think that risk shouldn't exist and we know about the trauma and blah, blah, blah. That's the fight, right? Could you say you definitely will not have any enforcement activity happening when you go get your vaccine? I would say no, because I would also never say that. Would I say we don't have any evidence locally or nationwide that immigration has been targeting folks at vaccination sites for detention and deportation? You could share that. Does that mean you'll be totally fine? I wouldn't share that language, right? I would say our best information is this. I think the other piece is, and we can talk about it more if you want, but since February 18th, Immigration and Customs Enforcement is still operating under the interim priorities memo, which, problematic as it is, does protect, I would say, a lot of undocumented folks in our community from deportation. So there should be multiple layers of reasons why nothing about immigration enforcement or immigration status or criminal activity, history, background, any of those boxes, none of that should come into play here. Operative word being should, and I think you've all seen how that can run the full spectrum of what we believe is what community should look like and not look like. So I think that's probably as clear as I would be able to say. Let me check some of the questions here. So there is a question here about Social Security number. So Rita, do you want to comment, or do you have information you could share about access to vaccinations with or without Social Security number?
Yes, I think you should be able to sign up with without your Social Security number at Walmart, CVS, Walgreens. I can't speak to specific local pharmacies, but you can definitely look into the variety, the spread of the vaccine sites online, as well as the government websites. They also do not require that.
I would also say that as you maybe encounter these things, so if you're working with someone and you're trying to get a vaccination somewhere and you come up to an obstacle, then it's part of your job to tell us and say, hey, this thing happened. What's my next move? How do we brainstorm this together? Let's figure out next best steps. And we're happy to do that with you on the spot or as we go. Or I know many of you are totally equipped to make those redirects on your own, and you'll report back to us with all the information and the solutions at the end. So this is not see y'all later. This is we're part of a team and we're learning and doing this together. So we'll navigate and adapt as we go. There is a question here, Allie, maybe you can respond about folks that had been going to check-ins for ankle monitor or ISAP check-ins used to have an ID card, and whether or not that ISAP ID card would be considered an ID for the vaccines.
Yeah, so we did have the same question, and we were able to call the dome. And so we know specifically at the dome that this will be an acceptable form of ID because it does have a photo and also includes a date of birth. If that's going to work for other vaccination sites, I'm not entirely sure. But as you encounter that, like Sarah said, send us that information so we can get that out to everybody else as well.
Similarly, I see a question here about if you don't have a driver's license or a government ID, a foreign passport, mail, Rita specifically shared information, right, about the DOME event where we have the most information, I would say, and what folks are willing to accept. And we've seen that they at least have committed to be fairly lenient with the demands for photo ID. So have folks bring what they have, and it should be enough. And if it's not, then we'll learn about it and we'll push where we need to push. I also want to lift up here that someone has shared experience that on online forms that ask for social security numbers, entering all 9s or all 0s sometimes like checks the box to be able to proceed in the form. And it clearly doesn't mean that it makes it very clear that you're not entering a bogus social security number, you're just choosing not to enter one. So that might be an option to try as well. I see, Mary, I think you have a question. Are you able to pop that into the chat or the Q&A, please? Yes, I would say right now we have the most information about what's happening at the Dome. And for folks who are able and interested, that's probably the best, easiest access place that we know of right now. Would you say that's fair, Rita?
I think so. And also, I wanted to lift up, like I took my mom to go get her vaccine at the local Walgreens because it's just down the street. And one of the helpful things that they had in their confirmation email was like, please bring like your insurance card, like photo ID, whatever. But at the bottom, it had a disclaimer that also said, if you are unable to provide an ID, like that, this will not preclude you from receiving the vaccine. So just keeping in mind that at the end of the day, folks really want to make sure that you have access to the vaccine, and asking questions may be helpful also. And again, we may not have all the answers, but anything that you learn, remember, co-learning space, please report back to us.
Okay, I'm going to pause for just a second here as you continue to think through these things. You're welcome to pop your question into the chat or into the Q&A, where you also can do it anonymously if you'd like. Ooh, great question. So there's a question about 16 to 18-year-olds needing a parent with them to get vaccinated. I have not looked into that. Rita or Allie, do you have anything, or do we need to circle back?
I think we'll need to circle back on that one. But as of right now, as we know, Pfizer is approved for 16 and up and Moderna for 18 and up. And so they should be able to get the vaccine, but how? Stay tuned. Yeah.
That's a great question, Sandi. I would like to ask you if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. But thank you for asking. We'll find the information that we can get and share that with you quickly. So great question about who should we tell if we hear about a vaccination opportunity for it to be included in the list. I would say, well, I have an idea. Rita, do you have an idea?
Well, the ISPN sends out a weekly newsletter called the Weekly Roundup to our base. And essentially it's this newsletter with a bunch of different stuff, news, opportunities, vaccine events. We also have a section on our website where we have like more urgent and immediate updates, such as, oh my gosh, there's a vaccine event that's tomorrow and there are 500 slots and there's going to be language access that just needs to go out now. And so I would, all in all, I'm just trying to say the ISPN website is one place that you can look. Sarah, what would you say?
I was going to say you could probably either email it to the ISPN, or you will have direct contact information for at least Allie and myself. And so you can WhatsApp or email to us directly, and we can push it to the right places to get it sort of added to a list. I don't want to say the list, but to a list, and then distributed among the volunteers. Great. I see there's some ongoing chat and discussion about whether or not we should be taking 16 to 18-year-olds, whether or not parental signatures were required. Maybe you could give that permission over the phone. I think those are situations that at this point we'll do some research and see what we can find out is in advance. But I also think that we are going to need to figure that out as we go. We'll see who replies to the form. We'll ask the questions. You'll ask the questions, and we'll figure out what works best, right? So this is a compa-centric program, right? And so the idea here is to do what our community members need us to do, not to do what we want them to do, right? So we will talk about those things as they go, and this should be open communication. So if you run into an obstacle or a piece where you're not sure, or a place where you're uncomfortable, right? Maybe you don't feel comfortable transporting a 16-year-old and that's what's been asked, then you let me or Allie know and we will redirect and figure out next steps, right? So this is Compass-centric, and also you have the right to say no, and we'll do our best. Great, I see. Thank you for sharing. There's a vaccination event this Thursday at University City Community Center. So we'll make sure that we will add that to the list. Okay, I'm gonna move to our closing slide and talk about next steps, and then we can pause a little bit, excuse me, at the end to do more questions. Oh, there's a couple more coming in, hold on. I'm gonna pause and read. So
She's very
great.
funny. I'm just like, oh, what is
I know,
this
I feel like suddenly I'm the one that's like doing inappropriate Zoom things, getting too close to the screen.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
I just keeping it funny, keeping it lively this evening. So great question about how are we going to share this information in the community. So we are going to start with the list of folks that we're already connected to through existing accompaniment and IFR fund efforts. So we are connected to, I would say, not quite 2,000 people who are going to get text message information about this directly. I think the first, that's sort of like, I think as we're envisioning this, that's sort of maybe like phase one, before we go nuts publicizing this everywhere. If 1,500 people, you know, say yes, then I'm not sure that we need to move immediately into sharing widely on social media. So I think we'll make sure that you have access to the information where Compass can sign up, because I know several of you have relationships with the community, so it's not to prevent anyone from sharing this. I think we're just going to hold off on direct outreach until we have some first response on folks that we're already in relationship with. Regarding folks that live in Illinois, we are going, I'm going to say we'll follow up with you about that, just because I think that there are some, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Rita, is that there are some state differences and residency requirements and where folks have to go to get access.
Yes, if you are a resident of Missouri and you intend to use the Missouri Navigator, vaccine navigator that we were talking a lot about, you have to use a Missouri zip code. I tried it today and I was like, what if I live in Carbondale? And it was like, no, you have to be a Missouri resident. But if there are Illinois needs, we can troubleshoot this as well.
I will also respond here to another question that there are, as I mentioned at the beginning, although perhaps not very articulately, lots of other organizations are working on specific vaccination events, outreaching different immigrant communities and different underserved communities for vaccination. So this is not at all trying to replace that. And in fact, as those events come up, we're going to hope to funnel people right there, right? And so I think, again, just keeping in mind that this is supposed to be a piece of this broader community response that's trying to make this happen. So I think those things are definitely helping, and there's definitely a lot of information to sort through. So we are just trying to improve access to that. I see a couple of other questions here. I see a medical related question and I am not qualified to answer that. And I don't know if Rita or Allie, you have the answer from your conversations about vaccine, or if we need to follow up with Dan. I'm going to review some of the other questions here. Protocols for if someone has a reaction or getting sick. So we, as you'll read in sort of the reporting requirements or the confidentiality and liability waivers, we are asking for 2-week reporting feedback if there are any symptoms of illness. And so we'll be tracking that like many other agencies are tracking in this sort of space. Let me pause for a second and read some information here. Or Rita or Allie, if you've read faster than me and want to respond, jump right in.
Apologies, there are many words on this chat box. Can you highlight the one that you are speaking to?
Great. I would say we don't have at this point an idea of like a target number of people that we're trying to serve. I think the way we generally run accompaniment at IFCLA is trying to be able to have enough volunteers available to meet the needs of the community. So that looks successful to me, or success looks like to me, when we can say yes to every time we're asked to accompany. And so I don't know what that looks like yet, but rather than set a goal for we want to be able to accompany 500 people, the goal is we want to be able to say yes every time a neighbor in our community says, I want a neighbor. So I am going to follow up. We will do some research about whether or not people who are pregnant or breastfeeding are prohibited. So that seems to be a question that some of the surveys are asking. And the question is whether or not that prohibits access to a vaccine. Are they administering vaccines to women who are pregnant and breastfeeding? I don't have that answer. So I will follow up and we will include that in the emails and information that you will all get. Great. Okay, some other questions going here. And in fact, a personal testimony saying, ooh, I am a breastfeeding mom and I did get vaccinated. So maybe that seems to be the running trend here. Thanks for jumping that in, that it seems like breastfeeding and pregnant folks are eligible for the vaccine based on expert knowledge and personal experience in this community. Go community.
Go learning space. Yeah.
Okay, so it's just after 8. I know a couple of comments and stuff are still going through, so keep them coming. Oh, great, WhatsApp. We will come back to that. Let me pull up my next step screen here.
Yes, we are receiving additional comments in the chat from folks who are also experts. I'm just going to read these because I think y'all just type to all panelists. Pfizer actually provides antibodies to fetus and later baby. My daughter-in-law is expecting in August and researched this extensively. Our pediatrician recommended my wife, who breastfeeds, to take the Pfizer vaccine.
So much knowledge in this community.
Yes. Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, so next steps. And including in the next steps, I'm going to talk about WhatsApp. So thanks, Trish, for bringing that up. So the next step from here is you get to discern whether or not this is a good space for you to serve and to step up and be a part of this community. It might not be. And if you're feeling like this is really cool, I'm glad this is happening, and I'll share it with a friend, that's great. So there's no obligation, just like we do any accompaniment training. This is not a space where you came to this, so you better sign up on my form. I'm not really going to check or run those numbers anyway. So if this is the space for you, then sign up on the form, and I will pull it into the chat in a second unless Ali or Rita can pull that URL for the volunteer registration form in here. Otherwise, I can do it in a second. You will also get a follow-up email from us. I would like to say tonight, but I might give myself a little bit of grace and say tomorrow morning. But within the next, what's that, 8, 12? Let's say 18 hours, you'll get an email that has a link also to the registration, to the sign-up form. When you sign up, we're going to ask questions about your language. You'll be able to sign up for specific roles. You'll be able to sign up for specific, so the roles that Ali mentioned, right? On-site learning, on-site navigator, online navigator, transportation, all of them. Some of them you can pick. Similarly, you'll pick your area, St. Louis City, County, St. Charles County, all, some, none. You'll share whether or not you have language abilities, which ones they are. I am going to say yes, that is the one, but I will check in just a second, Rita. Or you can check, and if it is, then go with it. After that, there's the link in the chat. Thanks, Rita, on it. You can fill that out. The very last piece of that is a confidentiality agreement and a liability waiver. So confidentiality agreement is also making sure that, as we do in any accompaniment space, I think accompaniment is an opportunity for relationship and connection. It's not a space to broadcast information that is shared with you to anyone else unless you're given instruction to do so. So while I hope that you use these experiences to transform your role in our community and your role in the longer term work for justice and change, we don't share information. So what does that mean? Don't take a selfie unless the compa is like, let's take a selfie, and they're going to post it on their account first and you can share it. But the point is, this is a space that I need you to be honest and truthful, that you're being asked to hold information and invited into a space that's personal, not just about personal health, but personal in terms of how we engage in this community. So things that I would say you would know is you're not going to get on Facebook and say, oh my gosh, I just went with Rita, this incredible woman from so-and-so who's this many years old, and I picked her up on Cherokee, and then I took her here, and here's the whole life story for public information because you think it's really helpful for other people to know that story. That's not the way to do it. So I'm going to trust that I don't have to spend too much time talking about that here, and I'm going to trust that if when in doubt, you're going to leave it out. So if you're not sure that you should include it or post it or tweet it or talk about it, you're not going to do it. If you want to have questions, if you're not sure, if you want to go into details about proper use of social media or how to talk about this experience while being respectful and honoring the space of accompaniment, Allie or I would be happy to engage in that conversation with you. I can't see the chat. I don't. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. Flag something if I'm missing it, please, Rita or Allie. Okay, WhatsApp. Allie, do you want to go? Actually, I'm going to maybe invite you to talk about what is WhatsApp and how can the WhatsApp be used?
Yeah, so in accompaniment, we generally use WhatsApp to communicate with compas. This is just an application that you can download and install on your phone that will be linked to the same phone number that you use to send text message. So this is going to be, if any of you have had to download a Signal group for work or something along those lines, this is just an application that you can download that you can send communications out with Wi-Fi or a cellular plan.
Great. So I will say in the confirmation email after you sign up, I've included a link. So if you sign up on the sign up form that was just posted in the chat, the confirmation email that you get from that has a link to WhatsApp on the web, on the internet. So you can see and read how to download it. It's free, it's secure, so it's encrypted, which is, I think, a little bit helpful in terms of honoring privacy and not saving information and things like that. Other folks here tonight are sharing information about that, so I appreciate it. It also just ensures that we're all using the same platform and that we're not having messages on different phones in 30 different apps, which can get very overwhelming. So we're going to pick one and we're going to use that one. And we're not going to use email, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but the primary communication is going to be WhatsApp. So that'll be your second step if you haven't done it. If you're going to do step one, then you need to do step two or make sure you already have it. Again, you can email Allie or myself or call or text us and we'll be happy to walk you through that. The third piece will be checking the volunteer portal. So in the confirmation email from tonight, I will give y'all information of the volunteer portal. Allie, if you wouldn't mind, if you're able to pop the URL into the chat, you can have a link to it right now, and then I will email the password. It's a password protected site. When you get into it, you will see like different boxes of like volunteer opportunities at IFCLA. So you'll see stuff from like IFRFund and regular accompaniment training. So you'll pick the box that says Vaccination Accompaniment project, and then you'll have access to this recording, some of the resources and tools and other stuff like that. I will say, if you click on it now, and if we gave you the password right now, and then you got in right now, you'd be like, bro, why is there nothing here? It's going to get updated after tonight because I have to make the recording and I have to edit the video and save the slides and then put them on the website. So it will be up soon, but that's the link where you will go to find it, and we'll share the password shortly. Then after that, we will we will be in touch with, as folks register and ask for accompaniment, you will hear from one of the three of us as we get rolling to connect you and to sort of start the accompanying and then report back. And that, my friends, is it. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to come back here for maybe one more set if we have any questions. We are 15 minutes ahead of time. I knew we could do this before 8:30. Thanks for making time in the evening. So like I said, if you have any questions, I will go ahead and pop mine and Allie's emails in the thing so that you can email us directly. And if you have any questions. And so then you will hear from us again after you fill out the volunteer form. That's a lie. You'll also hear then, but you'll hear as a follow-up from this this training tonight. We'll send an email that said, that has all of the information of the next steps that I just shared now. And I know we did have a couple of questions that we'll follow up on. So, so we will look into that, and you will hear that from us by email or WhatsApp or the volunteer portal. So we will, that's all we have for tonight, folks. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for considering accompaniment. Thanks for thinking about our community, for being willing to build power and build relationships together. I know today, I wish we would have held space at the beginning for the verdict that came down today and the impact that that has, impacts that that has in our community. So thank you for holding space for all of the work that we have to do together in your heart and in your life. So thank you, muchísimas gracias. Thanks for everyone that's here, and we will talk soon.
Thanks.
Maybe we'll just leave it running for a second, Rita, in case there's other questions that pop in. But we could stop recording.
Sure.